That's what people say. What about high school? What about high school? I go, today is the day that He has given for us to rejoice and be glad in. We live today. Today. Focus on what He wants to be imparted from this to them today. And then, if there's time in the day, you see to formal stuff like language and maths to make sure you're keeping the education going and you're being a responsible parent and you're educating your children. When they go into tertiary life, they're not going to ask them now, when you were in grade 3, did you do volcanoes or earthquakes? They're not going to be interested in that in the adult life. They're going to say, can you do maths? How's your language? What do you know in science? Well, the thing I know in science is God is the greatest creator of all. And He is the greatest scientist of all. I'm never, ever going to attain or know what He knows. But I have studied and I have explored sciences to find out more about my Creator. And these are the things that I have studied. Exploring creation, with chemistry and physics. Absolutely phenomenal what God taught me in this. That's what it's about. Not I've got a grade whatever 70% in chemistry. So what? I'm sorry, I'm not belittling anybody who's got a high chemistry degree in the room. But if that person's got a chemistry degree and they're a pharmacist or whatever, but they don't know God, that's what we are here for. We are here to say that God needs everybody to know Him. That's more important to Him than their degrees. Other interesting fact, go do the statistics if you like, but the degrees often are not used in life. So the parents have afforded these 3 years, 4 years at university, and the student decides to do something else. The percentage of that is pretty alarming. That's the one thing. The other fact is they are now interviewing people and doing character analysis with them to decide if they want to employ them. And they say, oh, but I've got this paper and this paper, and then we're not interested in your papers. Could you come over here, please, to our personal coach analysis, character person, blah, blah, blah. They're going to interview you. No. Okay, we'll take this guy. What papers does he have? None. Who taught him? His mom. That's a fact. That's happening. Companies are doing that now. Who taught him? His dad. Even better. I was speaking to one of the moms here, and she was concerned about the fact that she might have left it too late to be considering home educating, because her children are already past the little ones. And I said to her the following, and I feel to share with you, that parents that are pulling their children out of school when their children are 10 and 12, and then they're starting this homeschooling, which is then school at home, which a lot are doing, and others that are following the learning lifestyle, either way, the children are at home. There's a lot of time now for them to restore and redeem those years of maybe a lot of input that the parents didn't think should be there. And so they're doing the cleanup, spring clean, and then they start putting in the new. And there's a transformation that takes place. So it's almost like those beginner years weren't really noticed at the end of the story. It wasn't noticed that they weren't actually home educated from the beginning, because God is a God, He's a redeemer, and those years get given back and so on and so forth. But I've got something now to tell you, and that is a lot of families might be home educating from baby birth to 12 or 13, and then they start thinking high school. And they start thinking, well, what about high school? They must go to high school now. Because when they're in high school, they're going to get prepared for life, and they've got to learn about, the more formal studies. And I can't actually do that because I'm not educated that far, or I'm nervous about that. So the parents go all those years, 12 years of putting in a good foundation, and then they hand them over to the systems of the world. And I want to tell you now, and I don't think there's going to be a home educator alive that's not going to agree with me, that have got adult children that have been home educated. The young adult years are by far the most important when it comes to what we're talking about here today. So if there's a tutor or a play group, or they were in school for the first 3 years and all the rest of that, that is not as noticeable when the parent then takes hold of the whole responsibility and starts to. That is not as noticeable that they didn't do that to those when they didn't do it in the last 3 years. That is more noticeable. And the reason is this, is those young adult years are, you've got your son and your daughter's attention. They're thinking on a more mature level. You've got time to input into their lives the purity and the goodness and the father heart and the father inputting and going and having meetings with his young adults and taking them out for coffee. And all of this is now on a completely different level to raising little children and sorting out the squabbles and seeing to it that their maths and language is done and everything else. That is the most vital and most precious time. And if you think of Bible times, and if you think of times gone by as in apprenticeships and training, the father training his son, when he's 13 he comes into the family business. Remember those days? Well, not remember them because we weren't raised like that ourselves in the more modern world. But just think about that model. And isn't that model a model that is closer to the model of Christ?